The woman who painted this work was one of the great artists of the Baroque, and yet her name remains unknown to many. Artemisia Gentileschi dared to challenge the world of art in the 17th century, creating one of the most violent and unforgettable scenes in history. But this painting cannot be understood as merely a biblical inspiration. Artemisia was the victim of abuse when she was still a teenager, an event that marked her life profoundly, and that, for centuries, was used more to judge her than to recognize her as an artist. Some see in Judith Beheading Holofernes her way of responding to that injustice, as if, through painting, she sought a form of vengeance, transforming her pain into a brutal image that, even 400 years later, stands as a testimony to the difficult life she endured. This painting is intense, bloody, and at the same time profoundly elaborate. It shows us the decisive moment in the biblical story of Judith and Holofernes, an episode told in the Old Testament and later enriched in certain apocryphal texts. According to the story, Judith was a wealthy widow from Bethulia. At the moment depicted in this painting, her city was under siege by the Assyrians and surrender seemed inevitable. The enemy army was commanded by the feared general Holofernes, whom Judith decided to confront with a daring plan. Pretending to betray her people, she infiltrated the enemy camp. Holofernes, captivated by her beauty, welcomed her with banquets and eventually took her into his chambers. Drunk with wine and desire, he became completely vulnerable. That was when Judith, assisted by her maid, seized the sword and with 2 swift, precise blows cut off his head. She hid the gruesome proof in a sack and returned to Bethulia, and when she revealed the general's head, terror swept through the Assyrians, who fell into chaos and fled in defeat. In most early representations, Judith appeared holding the severed head of Holofernes. Sometimes she carried it in her hands, other times in a basket, or even presented on a platter. Although it was a macabre subject, artists often preferred to avoid the brutal moment of the decapitation itself. Instead, they highlighted Judith's wealth, emphasizing her elegant garments and turning her glittering jewels into the focal point of the composition. This not only showcased her social status, but also suggested the nobility of her deed. But everything changed with Caravaggio, who in 1599 painted his own version of Judith and Holofernes. Caravaggio was famous for his raw and unsettling style. He used real models in his paintings, giving his characters an extraordinarily human presence. He also revolutionized the scene with his signature use of chiaroscuro, one single source of light cutting through the darkness, heightening the gestures, the gazes, and every detail with a drama the world had never seen before. The version we are looking at now belongs to the Italian painter Artemisia Gentileschi, an extraordinary artist who not only demonstrated a technical mastery surpassing many of her contemporaries, but was also one of the few women to achieve recognition and commercial success in the fiercely competitive art world of the 17th century. It is believed that Artemisia may have met Caravaggio through her father, Orazio Gentileschi, himself a renowned painter. In any case, the mark of the Baroque master is unmistakable. His raw realism and dramatic use of light became a source of inspiration for an entire generation, and Artemisia knew how to take it even further. Her interpretation of the story of Judith not only carries Caravaggio's severity, but intensifies it. In her version, the scene is confined to a tighter space, the bodies entangle, the 2 women hurl themselves upon their victim, and everything is illuminated by a single lateral light that highlights skin, fabric, and shadow in a chilling contrast. Judith grips Holofernes' hair firmly and presses his throat against the blade. This detail places the general's head at the very center of the painting, around which the entire composition revolves. Intertwined arms form a whirlwind framing his face, while his dark beard, the cross-shaped sword, and the spray of blood all reinforce the violence of the moment. One of Artemisia's most striking achievements is that she forces us to look directly into the eyes of Holofernes, wide open at the instant he realizes his fate. The viewer cannot escape that gaze filled with terror. The 2 women, Judith and her servant Abra, hold him down with relentless determination. Their faces show no disgust or fear, only a firm serenity, as if they accepted violence as a necessary duty. And yet, the brutality is undeniable. The blood spurting from Holofernes' arteries splashes onto Judith's chest, gleaming like a necklace of rubies. The famous Judith Beheading Holofernes was not the first time Artemisia Gentileschi approached this subject. In fact, it was her second version. An earlier canvas, painted before 1612, serves as a prototype that allows us to compare and better understand the power of the definitive work. In that first painting, the composition was already almost fully defined, and Gentileschi barely altered the overall arrangement in the final version. The most evident difference lies in the figure of Holofernes. In the second work, he appears more centrally placed, so that Abra's arm and the sword form a vertical axis that cuts through the canvas. The chiaroscuro is also intensified. The highlights are bolder, the reflections more abundant, and the contrasts, especially on Holofernes' face, are much sharper. Judith's dress takes on a brighter yellow, while both the darkness of the setting and the violence of the act in the foreground are underscored with greater drama. Even small details heighten the tension. The red cuffs of the women's rolled-up sleeves echo the very same tone as the blood seeping through the folds of the sheets, creating a visual echo that amplifies the horror. Taken together, everything becomes more intense, more brutal, more inescapable. But up until now, I still haven't told you the story behind this painting, the terrible episode in Gentileschi's life that very likely led her to create this scene. However, before continuing with the story, I'd like to remind you that this painting is already available in our catalogue. On our website, you'll find more than 700 artworks ready for you to collect your favorite and decorate your home, just like in the video you're watching. Worldwide shipping is free, and by purchasing from the store, you'll be supporting me tremendously in being able to keep creating videos like this every week. I'll leave you the link in the description. Now then, let's continue. Artemisia Gentileschi's artistic talent manifested at an early age. Equally precocious was her interest in portraying women with strength and autonomy. Throughout her career, she depicted female figures as powerful and complex beings, capable of making momentous decisions, from Cleopatra and Lucretia to Salome and Susanna, the protagonist of Susanna and the Elders. In her representation of Judith, Artemisia shows her far from fragile, solid, determined, and merciless. One of the most studied episodes of her life, often connected to her affinity for strong heroines, was the assault she endured in 1611 when she was still a teenager at the hands of the painter Agostino Tassi, a collaborator and close associate of her father, Orazio Gentileschi. The case reached the courts, and extraordinarily detailed judicial records have survived. They include Artemisia's direct testimony, where she described the violence of the event in these words: "Then he threw me to the edge of the bed, pressing me with one hand against my chest and putting a knee between my thighs to prevent me from closing them. He lifted my clothes and covered my mouth with one hand and a handkerchief so I could not scream." Despite the force of her testimony, the trial was not simple. Gentileschi and Tassi remained in contact after the assault, based on his promise to marry her in order to restore her honor. Her father, moreover, hesitated to press charges for fear that the scandal might damage the family's reputation and his daughter's future prospects for marriage. In the end, the court sentenced Tassi to exile from Rome. However, the sentence was never enforced. The interpretation of Artemisia Gentileschi's art has been largely shaped by the events of her life, and many historians have read her paintings as a kind of proto-feminist revenge against the violence she endured. According to this view, Artemisia poured out her rage against Tassi and against men in general through scenes of brutality and bloody justice. However, reducing her work solely to her biography is a mistake. This approach overlooks a broader and deeper reading of her art, diminishing her intellectual and artistic abilities by confining her to a supposed art of passion. A more fitting framework is the historical and professional context in which she worked. After moving to Naples in 1630, Gentileschi ran a successful painting workshop and worked under the patronage of dukes and monarchs. Her production responded to a market that demanded intense narratives, whether biblical or classical, and it is very likely that this painting was born out of that search for patrons and the consolidation of her career. As a woman, Artemisia likely relied on female models for her works, often her daughters and at times herself, which partly explains the centrality of the feminine in her art. Within those constraints, she not only managed to sustain herself as an artist, but also defied the expectations of her time. In a century when there were almost no women painters and when women in art were usually shown as passive or idealized, her Judith Beheading Holofernes stands as a powerful anomaly, a testimony of strength that, 400 years later, continues to astonish all who behold it. In any case, as always, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think paintings like this can reflect the artist's personal experience, or do you believe it's simply a coincidence? Feel free to share your interpretation in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end, and I'll see you in the next video.